August out the window. Is that it?
Not definitively. We still have wages data tomorrow, which is probably as important as the services inflation you mentioned in your intro. But I certainly think the marginal bit of news this morning makes August less likely. September now looms into view only 6 weeks later, so the overall path of loosening is probably unchanged, but its start date has probably shifted a little bit to the right.
One might ask, and this is in the words of Swati Dingra's words, then MPC member, saying that UK households have endured enough strain. It's about time they get down, don't they? I mean, would it not be as beneficial, if at all, like the ECB, to just make a gesture to consumers and say, we're cutting 25 basis points. We're going to pause, though, after that and see how things fare. But we want to prove to you and show you that we are headed in a downward trajectory on these rates.
Yes, so of the 9-person committee, Swati Dingra is one of 2 who at the last meeting voted for an immediate cut, justifying it by the fact that that squeeze that is still coming through in the data, and actually within the inflation data this morning we saw the mortgage interest payments on household debt, which is about £1.5 trillion, about 60% of GDP, is up 31% year on year. That's how much more mortgage interest payments is being paid. So she is saying, look, with that in the pipes, with more to come as refinancing deals come up, fixed before the spike in interest rates, actually we need to stay ahead of the curve here. The problem for Swati Dingra and her colleague Dave Ramsden is they're in a minority on the MPC, and therefore the collective view is probably not yet there that they've pushed down on services-led inflation. Having said that, for what it's worth, I would make a vote for cutting interest rates on the 1st of August, not least because the household savings rate that we see in the national accounts is north of 11%. That is suggesting the consumers are still feeling pretty cautious and probably need to signal for appetite for major purchases a cut in interest rates.
How long can you keep at this then until you start to eat into what is benign growth? Even the expectation of it to become 0.7% this year, according to the multilateral organizations, is still relatively high, and that could then be eaten away by a continued hike or remaining of these rates so high.
Yeah, we're even more constructive than you mentioned those IMF forecasts, 0.7%. The bank is actually just at 0.5%. We're at 1.2%, but still well below trend rate of growth, which is probably about 1.75% to 2%. And therefore, if you like, that is a reflection of the fact that that tightening of financial conditions, or historic tightening that is still to pass through the system, can squeeze and is squeezing consumer spending. And I think you're absolutely right. If the signal from further moves to the right is that consumers just use that as more of an excuse to push up the household savings rate further and compress consumer spending, we could start to see downside revisions to GDP. But it has to be said, and I think to give it its correct balance, UK GDP forecasts have been upgraded for about 18 months now on a steady revival from some pretty lowballed expectations at the end of 2020.
Levels, right?
Correct,
Exactly.
absolutely. The end of 2022, in the aftermath of the mini budget here in the UK in September 2022, expectations were for the economy to contract by 0.9% in 2023. Didn't happen. The economy actually expanded. And again, at the start of this year, economy expected to grow by 0.4%.
Sure.
We now see a path to, well, we think 1.2%.
But it's now the problem of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer has to now pretty much bulk up and say, these are the plans in place, and that's what you anticipate to get out today, out of the King's speech, effectively, and him putting down those laws. Your exact expectation from that, is this where he sets the agenda as clearly as possible on how growth comes about for this economy?
I think it's a big moment for the UK economy, because while Keir Starmer and his Finance Secretary Rachel Reeves would like to be lucky, and there'll be an element of luck regarding global economic conditions on the short-term growth agenda, the medium to long-term growth agenda will be framed by this King's speech, particularly on planning reform. If you're looking at getting structural growth back into the UK economy, deregulation of planning, making it more permissive for big infrastructure, big housing projects, and set the roadmap to building 1.5 million homes over the course of the Parliament, which is a huge ask. It's never been achieved in UK economic history. It needs to get moving pretty quickly, because the lead-in time of planning reforms to actually shovels in the ground, units being completed, it's a multi-year project.
Simon, look, there's so much that actually goes into this. I mean, we could have still spoken about tomorrow's employment data as well. 5.7% that you made note of is the expectation. You see that staying at 5.7 quickly?
No, we see it coming down. This is wages data. We see a path to 4% by the autumn. Problem is whether that data will come soon enough for an August rate cut. I doubt it will.